In the name of God, the Lord of mercy, the giver of mercy. Welcome people to our today's live session. For those of you particularly that have joined the Gabriel program and have enrolled onto module 1 or module 2. I'm very happy for you to be here with me today in order for us to discuss some opening aspects of both modules, but just generally speaking, the Gabriel curriculum. I thought it'd be quite poignant, perhaps to put it, that we start right at the beginning so as to contextualize where you are and the journey that you're taking, and philosophically speaking, why we're taking this journey. What's it all about? So I thought this would be a wonderful refresher for those who've signed up to Module 2. And for those on Module 1, it will give them context. Many of you on Module 1, you also took the module on reason and revelation. So what I'll be saying here today, as well as going into Module 1 on Iman, won't be anything old to you or surprising. Now, let's begin at the beginning. God says to the Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be on him, and we're talking about the final messenger of God, Muhammad, the son of Abdullah, from the tribe of Quraysh, the descendant of Ishmael, therefore the Ishmaelite prophet, who was the son of Abraham, and therefore a descendant of Abraham. God says, say, my Lord has guided me to a straight path, a lasting code, the religion of Abraham, who was godly. He was not a polytheist. Say, my prayers and sacrifice, my life and death are all for God, Lord of all the worlds. He has no partner. This is what I am commanded, and I am the first of you to submit myself for him. Now here clearly, God is telling the final messenger of God. And that's really important here. God is telling Muhammad to say this to people. Muhammad did not come to people and say, listen, I've brought a new religion, I am the founder, and this is Islam. He came and literally revealed and delivered the messages of God. And the message of God was very simple. It was, my Lord has guided me to a straight path. In Arabic, hadani ila siratim mustaqim. So the Arabic term sirat mustaqim, the straight path. Something that many believers say from the first chapter in their salah every day, 17 times a day, because there's 17 rak'at in the 5 daily prayers. So they say, ihdina sirat al-mustaqim. Guide us to the straight path. What God is doing here is defining what that straight path is. God is defining for you what that straight path is. And he's saying that Sirat al-Mustaqim is what? The lasting code. Dinan qiyaman. The lasting code. Dinan qiyaman. And what does that mean by lasting? Meaning it's been the one that has been going on. Yeah, it's been there from the beginning and it's still going on now. It's the one that's lasted time. Not lasted in necessarily comparison, as in it's the same thing. It's the everlasting code. It's the one code of God. Now, what do we mean by code here? It's the code to live by. For those of you into maybe ancient, Akkadian or Sumerian or Mesopotamian, history, you probably heard the term the Hammurabi Code. So it was a code. The Hammurabi Code, basically Hammurabi is a king and he has a code, a codified law. That's what God is referring to here. All right, your deen would be your codified law, the code you live by in your daily interactions, in your behaviors, in your dealings with other people, whether they're social dealings, whether they're economic or financial dealings, and so on. So God is saying this is the code that has always been there from God. Millata Ibrahima Hanifa. It is the millah, loosely translated as religion, and as many of you know, we get into what the term religion means later on. But the religion of Abraham, Hanifan, he was Hanific, meaning godly, because Hanif means to lean towards something from Hanafa. So he's always leaning towards God, he's godly. وَمَا كَانَ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ, and he was no polytheist. So what we're seeing here is that Muhammad ibn Abdullah, Muhammad the son of Abdullah, who is a descendant of Abraham, an Ishmaelite, he comes to the people and he's told by God to say to them, I bring you the truth, the everlasting code, the perpetual code of God that's always been there. It is the religion of Abraham I'm bringing you. This is God speaking in the Quran. Now, if we believe in the Quran, of course, then we're like, okay, then we are on the religion of Abraham. We are min millah Ibrahim. We are from the religion of Abraham. Now, the question of what Islam is and where it comes from, that's something that we discuss not only throughout the course and modules, but we discuss it also in context in module 2. But fundamentally, there is no religion called Al-Islam. Al-Islam is actually just a verb, right? It's a verbal noun, that describes a doing. So what does a verbal noun mean? In English, it's basically a verb in the gerund form. So you'd say, I am going. Going here is to go. It's a verb, but the word going is a verbal noun. It's telling us in a nounal form a verb. So even the word Islam, which means aslama, which means to give up, to submit. When somebody maybe puts a gun in your face and says, give up, or hands up and you do this. This is aslama. If you're a grappler and you tap out, aslama. You submitted. You said, okay, cool. So here, it's an action. It's to submit. So it's submitting. So when we use this now as a proper noun for the name of a third religion, i.e. after Judaism, Christianity and Islam, everything's gone wrong. Literally, it's gone wrong. And in fact, this verse here in the Quran, in Surah Al-An'am, which is chapter 6, is a chapter on livestock, is actually an entire chapter about the pagan Arabs and the irrationality of their ways, and the irrationality of their practices, and the irrationality of the code that they live by. God's point in this entire chapter, especially, and it becomes really explicit, it hits a crescendo at the end, is that your ways are stupid, you are a silly bunch of people doing very irrational things. God is not irrational, and what he's revealed, is not irrational. Therefore, do not claim to speak on behalf of God with your silly laws that lead to very bad outcomes. And then God tells them, listen, these are my laws. And it's beautifully summarized to show the logic and common sense reasoning, right, that one can employ to see the sense in what God wants from us and how they bring about very, very good outcomes. And they safeguard us, from tyranny, oppression, and all sorts of evil acts. And by evil acts, I mean things that we all know, like murder, like killing children. Because these are the things are forbidden. The kind of things that you lot are doing, nitpicking, silly things. Like when it comes to animals, you can eat this, but the women can only eat that. It's like, what nonsense is this? Don't ascribe that to me. So the whole surah really is about looking at what the pagans were up to and then calling out their silliness. And then God then moves on and he discusses the Jews and the Christians, those people who were claimants to the religion of Abraham, but they're divergent sects of the religion of Abraham. God says these people have broken up their religion, meaning the religion of Abraham, into sects, i.e. Judaism and Christianity. God then says to Muhammad, don't follow them. Don't say, okay, I'll join this sect or I'll join that sect. He's like, no, you go back and be on the religion of Abraham. You don't follow their ways. And Allah tells us this in Al-Baqarah, for example, in chapter 2 of the Quran. وَقَالُوا كُونُوا هُودًا أَوْ نَصَارَى تَهْتَدُوا. They say, be Jew or Christian, you will be guided. Hallelujah. Allah says, قُلْ بَلْ مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ حَنِيفًا. Say, no, tell them that you won't be guided with that. You be guided by following what you're claiming to follow, which is the religion of Abraham, who was godly, Hanific. Note here, God doesn't say, when they say, be Jew or Christian, you be guided. No, Islam. No. بل ملة إبراهيم حنيفا. Say no, the religion of Abraham is right guidance. Not that. You have gone off into your sects. Go back to the religion of Abraham. And you find, for example, in Christianity, right? You have people who are Catholics, Protestants, Methodists, Jehovah's Witnesses, whatever the case might be, right? And then you have people who sit outside, they say, listen, I'm not into all of this stuff. I just follow the Bible. I'm just a Christian. You find Jews doing the same. You find Muslims doing the same. Sunni, Shi'i. Or then within that, you have the Shi'i, the Ithna Ash'ari, the Zaydis, so the Twelvers, the Zaydis, the Fivers, and so on. And then you have some people say, no, I'm just a Shi'i. Same with Sunnis. There's how you Salafi, Sufi, this, that, the other. Say, no, I'm just a Sunni. And then even amongst the Sunnis and Shi'is, the different breakup, they say, listen, I'm not into all of this. I'm just a Muslim. So there, what you find, especially with non-sectarians, they're always trying to avoid sectarian groups, so sects and cults, and just ascribe back to the bigger picture. Well, funny enough, Islam isn't the bigger picture. Christianity is in the bigger picture. Judaism is in the bigger picture. The bigger picture is actually the religion of Abraham, Millat Ibrahim. And what does that mean? It means to be Hanific, to be godly. And I'm going to come to that in a bit more detail in a moment. So this is what God is saying. And then how do we live our lives? My prayers, my salah, my nusuk, my sacrifices, mahyaya wa mamati, my life and my death, lillahi rabbil alameen, is for Allah, Lord of the worlds, Lord of the realms. So this is how the Prophet is told to not only live, but to deliver the message. Now, where does the law and the way come into all of this? Very simple. God tells us, we sent to you the scripture with the truth, confirming the scriptures that came before it. So God sent his final decree. And this is the Quran. He's referring to what we refer to as the Quran in transliterating the Arabic. The word Quran just means the thing that is read. In fact, the Hebrews would call the Torah the Miqra, the thing that's read. So in Hebrew, the word Quran actually was used by the Hebrews for the Torah as well. The Torah in Hebrew means law. But the Quran also has a number of names. It has the Furqan, the criterion. It has the Bushra, glad tidings, literally the gospel. In fact, this is why when Abu Bakr put the Quran, the Mus'haf together, right? As in the first time round, before Uthman codified it and sent it out. When Abu Bakr put it together, the companions of the Prophet had a big debate as to what they were going to call it. Some of them said, we should call it the Torah because it's a book of law. Some said, no, it's a book that gives glad tidings, gives good news. We should call it the gospel. We should literally call it the Injil in Arabic or in English, the gospel. Others were like, no, we can't call it that. So in the end, they settled, and As-Suyuti talks about this in his Al-Itqan. They settled on the word Mus'haf, from Suhuf, from scriptures. So they called it the Mus'haf, the scriptures. And how and where did they get this from? Because the Christian Abyssinians used to refer to the Bible as the scriptures. So they said, okay, that's what it is. That's what we'll call it. Now note this, the companions themselves did not see the scriptures, these final scriptures revealed in the Arabic tongue to Muhammad, the son of Abdullah, in the Hijaz region. They didn't see this as a separate book. So, you've got now the Torah and the Gospel, and now you've got the Quran. No, they saw it as the same book, but just different chapters. And the Quran itself tells you this. So imagine you've got like the Torah is like the chapter number 2, the Gospels are like chapter 4, the final revelation is chapter 5. It's literally just carrying on. It's the Quran, when you think about it, when you first start reading the Quran, right? So you have the opening, which is only 7 verses, and clearly it's about the religion of Abraham. Guide us to the straight path. What's the straight path, as we just saw? The straight path is the lasting code, the religion of Abraham. So 17 times a day you're asking God, please guide me to the lasting code, the religion of Abraham. Did you even, if Al-Fatiha, if the first chapter is something that you recite every day, did you know that's what you're actually asking? When you say straight path, that's what it represents. That's how God describes it. He describes it in other ways in the Quran as well, but that is part of its description. Yeah, is the straight path meaning the path of guidance? It's the path that leads to God. It's the path that takes you to paradise. But if we're looking at it, as something in this world, as in what does that path look like? It is the path. It is the religion of Abraham. So God is explaining terms he's using elsewhere. Right? So here God is talking about the religion of Abraham being Salat Mustaqim. Therefore, he is explaining the straight path in the first chapter. Now, when you move on to the second chapter of the Quran, where does God start the conversation? He doesn't talk to Muslims. They don't even exist. When this Quran is being revealed, Muslims don't exist. When he talks to the people who have lost his favor. He's picking up the conversation 600 years after having talked to the Hebrews through Christ. Yeah, through Jesus. So 600 years later, he picks up the conversation and talks to the Hebrews and says, listen, my peoples, my special folk, I have favored you, meaning, what went wrong? Let's start at the beginning here. Let's just take a step back. Look, this is what was happening to you. This is what I did. These were my favors. And look how you kept on responding. You kept on going wrong. You were arrogant. You're pig-headed. You refused to see what I was doing for you. And every time I helped you out, or every time I came to your assistance, because you and I had an agreement, I stuck to mine, God is saying. But look how you kept on breaking your covenants. And basically, God here is giving them a final chance. They've lost favor. That's over. But it's like now you can join the massive group of believers. It's not a Hebrew time anymore. Yeah? You lot don't have favor. Now the conversation is for everybody. But why don't you come and join in here? Yeah, don't let this be another time in which this happens. God is having that conversation. Come back. Forget this new religion you've made up. Come back and be on the religion of Abraham. Now what's interesting is we call this religion Judaism. Jews don't call Judaism Judaism. It actually doesn't have a name. It doesn't have a name. They see themselves as the Israelites or the Hebrews or the Jews. And the term Jew is a political term. It only came about after the exile, the Babylonian exile. Therefore, where they were exiled and the people who saw themselves as the former citizens of the kingdom of Judea, they called themselves Jews basically. And then the name kind of stuck afterwards. However, like I said, it's a political term to do with a kingdom and the kingdom's name. So imagine I live in Great Britain, and imagine I'm sent into exile. So I call myself, after the term British, and then later on British turns into a term that's used for an ethnicity. That's basically what happened. But there is no actual name for their religion. Because they claim it's the religion of Abraham. It's the religion of the Israelites. And obviously the Israelites is an ethnicity coming from Israel, which is another name for Jacob. So here God is speaking to basically a group of people, not only the children of Israel, but he's talking to also those people who were outsiders, Gentiles, who kind of claim to follow their way and claim to follow Christ, but went off and did their own little Trinitarian pagan thing, right? And then he's talking to also the pagan Arabs, basically the Ishmaelites. Amongst them are the pagans, and amongst them are those who have now acknowledged, as the Quran's being revealed, acknowledged the religion of Abraham and come back to the ways of their forefather, Abraham, basically, because they're his descendants. That's the massive group of people that God is speaking to here. So this is really, really interesting. So you have this faith, it's a Semitic faith, it's a Semitic way, Now God tells us, we sent to you, Muhammad, the scripture with the truth. So he's talking about this one that's being revealed. This criterion now that's being revealed to Muhammad. Confirming, meaning it's in line with chapter 1, 2, 3, 4. This is chapter 5. So chapter 5, logically speaking, would continue from chapter 4. Right? And chapter 3 and chapter 2 and chapter 1. So yes, it's coming. So everything that came before it. وَمُهَيْمِنًا عَلَيْهِ. Muhaymin here means to have an authority, meaning it's the conclusion and therefore it's summarizing everything. And if you're going to get the truth of what happened in chapter 2, 3, 4, chapter 5 gives you the context and everything. And if any scribes have made mistakes or the message has gone a bit awry, chapter 5 kind of will set the tone straight. Just put the story back on track. You know, sometimes when you're watching a film, for example, you get a bit lost in the middle of it. What's happening? What happened there? But by towards the end, you're like, oh, okay, no, now I can understand what was happening in the middle. So God says, so judge between them. Judge between all of these people claiming the religion of Abraham, i.e. the Jews, Christians, and everybody else, according to what God has sent down, i.e. to you. Do not follow their whims. So their divergences from the Torah, or their divergences from the good news of Christ, right? Where they've diverged off because they've become little sects of the religion of Abraham. Don't follow their whims. Yeah, don't follow what they're claiming, which deviate from the truth that has come to you. We have assigned a law and a way to each of you. لِكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مِنْكُمْ شِرْعَةً وَمِنْهَاجًا. So we have given to everyone. So some mufassirin, and it can be taken both ways here, to be honest, in the Arabic. So one way you can look at that verse and say, it's saying every single person has been given this law and way. Or you can say, every nation was given a law and way. Every epoch, every era of humanity is given a law and way. Because obviously every era isn't the same, right? And therefore, there has been amendments to the law. Like, for example, the US Constitution, there have been amendments to the law. As we know from British law, there are amendments, there are changes, there are updates to the law. So in that way, the law updates, the code updates. So that's what God is saying. So everyone has a law and a way. So now how do we understand the law and way? How do we understand the religion of Abraham? If we were to look at this diagrammatically, well, it looks somewhat like this. What God tells us is that we are born with a natural disposition to God. So I put aside all of the religion stuff, right? And for those for example, for the newcomers here, welcome. One of the things that you hear me talk about a lot of the time is that religion is a new concept that was created, in the past 150, 200 years. And it's a product of, European views of religion post the great wars of Europe between the Catholics and the Protestants and so on. So as secularism emerged, it created religion. But in the ancient world, in the pre-modern world, religion hasn't existed in that way. People just go about their daily lives and they do God. Yeah? And they'll be like, oh, who do you worship? I worship Allah, Elohim, Yahweh, and so on, they would say, Jehovah, whatever the case might be. Pagans will be, oh, we worship Hanuman or Ram or this person or that person or Zeus or so on. Yeah, that's what people say. And we are from this place on earth. I come from Athens. I come from Damascus. I come from Cairo, Al-Qahira. At that time, Cairo probably didn't exist, like early on. Yeah, in fact, there was just tents there where Amr ibn al-As set up called Al-Fustat. But so different cities have emerged over time as well. But they would just talk about the city state they probably came from, the lords that the gods that they worshipped, and that was it. And then there was just a godly way. What God is saying is that when humans came about on earth, they just have a natural disposition. Fitrah, we say in Arabic. So everyone has a natural disposition to serve God. Yeah, and to live under God's law, to recognize, right? So it's a natural disposition, an intellectual and emotional disposition to theism and to understand their place in the order. Like, for example, say you're playing a sport and you sit down or you join in. So, for example, football or soccer, as our North American brethren put it. So you're there. You're on the pitch, you're playing football or basketball, whatever the case might be. And after a little while, you can see people running around doing their thing. You intuitively know your place in the order. You know who's good, you know who's not so good. You can see where there is a gap in the field, whether you should be playing in the midfield, whether you should play in defense, whether you should be playing in an attacking, striking position, whether you just need to go and stand at the nets in goal. You kind of can work out. Naturally, intuitively, you can work that out. So here the fitrah is the way in which everything has been created in an order. Everything intuitively knows its place in that order. Yeah, so you have this natural disposition. Now look what God says. Yeah, So fully commit to the code, to the deen. In Arabic, a deen is code, to the code, in complete godliness. This is, and godliness here is Hanific, right? That's the Arabic word. This is the natural disposition. فطرة الله التي فطر الناس عليها. This is the natural disposition God instilled in people. There is no altering God's creation, meaning you can't change this natural disposition about them. ذلك الدين القيم. This is the long established code. It's always been this way. But most people do not realize it. So here, what is God saying? Let's just put religion aside. Let's go into the way humanity has been for thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years. We're talking pre your Islam and all of that stuff. People are there, civilizations, people are born, they come into the world. There isn't religion, there is just this natural disposition. And then there is a code you live by. Yeah, and you can't change that natural disposition. That's what God is saying. That's how people are made. And they talk about this, they call it the God gene. Now, how does that work then if we look at it diagrammatically? So you have Allah. Allah in the Semitic language. So I'm not talking about Arabic here. Yeah, this is something that's lost on a lot of people. The word Allah is a Semitic term. Even if you read the King James version of the New Testament, right? It transliterates, funny enough, there isn't much transliteration in it, but this is probably one of the main parts where they translate, or the translation actually transliterates Jesus' statement, which is translated as Lord, God, why have you forsaken me? As Ilahi, lama sabaqtani. So Ilahi is Ilahi, my God. Yeah. So Allah, yeah, so he's saying you wouldn't have the al because that's a definite article here, but you have the la ilah. So Allah, yeah, or Allah is the ilah, to be served. So the one to be served. So ilahi means the one I serve. So that's what he's calling out. And of course, he's speaking in Aramaic here. That's what's being transliterated. But in Hebrew, it's the same. So you say, no, it isn't. They don't say Allah. They say Elohim. So the im sound or the sound, even in Arabic, is the pluralization of a noun, right? Like you have Muslim, Muslimun. Here is with the waw. There is as opposed to but it's a pluralization. So it's pluralizing the name of God. Why? Well, God uses the plural even in Arabic. Inna a'ataynaka al-kawthar. We gave you al-kawthar. Because obviously it's the plural we. It's how royalty and majesty speaks. It speaks in a plurality when it's emphasizing and expressing magnitude and power. That's all. These are just expressions of language. So their Elohim is not saying there's lots of ilahs. It's just saying their Elohim is using that as a majesty of God. So again, this is a Semitic term. So you have Allah, yeah, the one to be served. Now, what we have there is then a conception of reality. What is actually out there and in here, the body. So what's out there in the cosmos, what's in here in the world, on earth, sorry, and then what's here within ourselves, literally. I'm talking about biology here. I'm talking about chemistry. I'm talking about physics. I'm talking about when we're thinking and neurons are firing off and doing all sorts of stuff. Yeah, how our reproductive organs work, how our nervous system works, how we fight off bacteria and viruses and all sorts, how the world works around us, physics. We're talking about astrophysics. Yeah, what's out there in the cosmos, how light works, what is gravity, what is, the space-time continuum, all of those things. This is reality. What exists? So there is a conception of reality that God has given us. And we have an Abrahamic conception of reality. That is Millata Ibrahim. And everything that happens in that reality. Now, that conception of reality is that also God has given us a law and a way. That law tells us, that law meaning that shir'ah, right? These are the codes we live by. So basically, the law and the way is the code of God. The law is how we behave, what we do, how we do it. And the way is the values we live by. What does values mean, by the way? Sometimes people assume values are just ethics. No, they're not. Values are like, I'm always on time. It's a value I live by. Those are my values. I don't make people wait for me. You can't ever be on time. So you're either early or you're late. So my values are to be early. That's the values I live by. If people speak to me, I give them eye contact. Yeah, my default position is to be polite, kind, courteous. Those are the values I live by. Yeah, sometimes people don't put those things into ethics. And some people, they use values and the word ethics synonymously. It doesn't matter. The point is that the values you live by. You might say, okay, cool. The values I live by is that I use the intellect. So I don't leave things to random imagination and superstition and all sorts of stuff. God gave us a brain. God ennobled us with the intellect. And therefore I use it, understanding that that's the tool that God gave me in order to understand the world around me, to make judgments, to make good judgments. Yep, those are values I live by. So here you have the law and the way, ash-shara wal-minhaj. And those are your values. And those values come along from your intellect, from your emotions, from your psychology. Now, what's the purpose of deen here? And by the way, everything in this blue line, as in the dotted line, this is deen. This is the code. So the code is the Abrahamic reality, right? A conception of reality that conforms to Abraham's conception of reality. And it's to live by the law and the way. This is all Quranic, by the way. Every single point, every single word here I'm using is it not only explicitly found in the Quran, it's covered by God as a concept which God explains in the Quran. So it's not like I've just picked out Arabic words from the Quran. God literally spends a page, sometimes entire surahs, breaking down the concept and what it means. So you have the law and the way. What's the purpose of all of this, the law and the way? Because it cultivates two things in the human. One, a growth mindset. It gives you development. It brings about, the whole point is, with all of the competing interests and variables that life throws out there and the environment throws out there, it leads to good outcomes. If you're in a good place, your way, the way you are as a person, your minhaj, and the law you live by, which safeguards you from making, big mess ups, it's cultivating you to be a productive, constructive person. And the other thing it cultivates, which is really important, is resistance to corruptive forces. So one, it cultivates a positive, meaning something that drives you forward, and a push against the negative, meaning something that might hit you from the other side. And of course, in Surah Al-A'raf, chapter 7, God tells us about Iblis, and who Iblis is and what Iblis is after. And what does he say? He says, when it comes to your servants, your subjects, I will attack them from the front, the back, the left and the right, and you will find none of them giving thanks. So he hits you 360. So the purpose of deen is to you're learning martial arts and you're learning how to defend from the front, the back, the left and the right. If you're hit from different angles, you've got your blocks up, you've got your guards up, you're in stance. So it cultivates in you development and growth, drawing forward, and a resistance to corruptive forces. Now that is the deen. A deen meaning that is the body. When you do deen, deen is also a verb, and this is something that people don't know. Deen is a verb from dana yadinu, which is he deened. And what does it mean? What does deen mean? It means to adopt a code. So when you do the true deen, then you are adopting God's code based on a true conception of reality, and that is the Abrahamic conception of reality. If you fully adopt that code and you're fully compliant, not you pick and choose, and by the way, that's where the word Islam comes in. Yeah, if you're fully, because the word al-Islam basically implies full compliance as opposed to the partial compliance of those people who left the religion of Abraham and made up their divergent sects, basically Judaism and Christianity. If you're fully compliant, you will be truly guided and you will succeed. That is a breakdown in the English language of what's going on. Yeah, and that's where we are, learners of Module 1, 2. That's where we're coming from. Now, let's sit back and understand the story. Umar ibn al-Khattab, a companion of Muhammad, relates in Sahih Muslim that once the Prophet was once sitting, and he says, we were sitting with him. فَبَيْنَمَا نَحْنُ جُلُوسٌ عِنْدَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. Yeah, so we were sitting in with the Messenger of God. And a man appeared, extremely white clothing, and extremely black hair. لا يرى عليه أثر السفر ولا يعرفه منا أحد. You couldn't see the effects of travel on this gentleman, but neither did any of us recognize him. So he's clearly an out-of-towner, but he doesn't look like he's been traveling out of town. And you can imagine at that time, you're going to have all sorts of marks and smells on you. You've been riding camels and walking through, deserts and land, rocky land and so on. But he didn't look like traveling. He looked like he just got up, ironed clothing, the washing machine is being in the dryers, dry cleaners, just looks epic, smells, of the best detergent. He didn't look like he's a traveler here. So we're like, who is this dude? Who is this guy? And he comes down and he sits with the Prophet on the floor. He sits on the floor, knee to knee. And he says to him, Muhammad. Now remember, addressing somebody, you would address them with respect, right? So the companions would speak about the Prophet and say, yes, Muhammad said, and we follow the religion of Muhammad. But when you're speaking to him, you're going to say, Oi, Muhammad, are you? You're going to say, Messenger of God or Prophet. But he says Muhammad. So he's like, it's a bit weird. Is he one of these Bedouins who have no manners, maybe? Right? So he says, so this man, already almost his sirens are going off, and he says, tell me, what is submission? So the Prophet replies, submission is that you openly, publicly proclaim that there is only one to be served, and that I am his messenger, the one to deliver his message. So what I'm bringing is from God. And that you connect with God 5 times a day, because salah comes for sila. You connect with God 5 times a day, and that you pay the taxes, and that you fast, and that you undertake a journey, the pilgrimage, to pay homage to the Most High. The man says, well done, true. Umar says, hang on a minute. You asked the question, how are you going to tell him he's right? Well done. Literally, the hadith is this, right? So Umar's like, I don't get this. This is crazy. So then the man carries on and he says, okay, tell me, what is Iman? Iman means trust and to have faith in someone. So when I say to you, I have faith you can do it, that's me saying, I have Iman in you. So he said, what is this Iman? He said, Iman is built on 6 features. In Allah, the one to be served. The malaika, from malak, which means angels. The same word is in Hebrew as in Arabic. It's a Semitic term, right? So malak, basically what we would describe as angels, but we don't actually believe in angels, right? And that's something that you're going to see in Module 1, and of course Module 2 people know this already. So malak. Then the decrees of God, the scriptures, the decrees that have been revealed from God. And the human messengers that they come with. And the last day, Yawm al-Akhir. And al-Qadr, the algorithm, the order that God has created and how it unfolds. He said, Sadaqt. He said, Ahsant. He goes, yep, you said truth. Well done, you're right. Again, almost like, hang on a minute, guy, you're asking the question. How are you telling him he's right? Yeah, because obviously for Umar ibn al-Khattab, this is like a Bedouin who's probably come from somewhere else. Although there's all of these kind of questions. It's not really working here. If he was, then why does he look so clean? And he looks like he hasn't traveled at all. But he's like, you're asking questions. You've come to seek knowledge. Why are you telling the Prophet he's right? What do you know? Who are you? But of course, Umar's not jumping in. The Prophet's clearly engaging him. So he's just sitting back. Now, people like Umar and Khalid ibn al-Walid, these were companions of the final messenger of God. If they felt the Prophet was being, disrespected, they would say like really stark statements like, أَفَلَا أَضْرِبُ عُنُقَهُ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. Shall I not strike his neck, messenger of God? And we find the companions of the ancient Hebrew prophets were very much the same. And then the Prophet said, no, calm down, and so on. So there's different hadith where they've done that. But anyhow, coming back to the point, Umar's still catching feelings here. He's like, who's he to say this? Then the man continues and he says, okay, what is ihsan? Ihsan means to do something well. Ahsana means to do well, to do it really good. And the Prophet says to serve God as if you can see him, as if he's there, like you can literally see him. And even though in reality you don't see him, you behave as if you know he's seeing you. Not as if he is seeing you, but you internalize that. Like if you know you're on camera, you behave far better than being, a bit heedless to, oh, maybe nobody's watching me. Then the man carried on and he asked him, when is the hour going to come? When is it all going to end? The Prophet said, مَا الْمَسْئُولُ عَنْهَا بِعَلَمَ مِنَ السَّائِلِ. The one who's being asked is no better informed than the one who's asking the question. So he said, okay, but what are his signs? Then the Prophet goes through some signs, right? And they seem very metaphorical. Some say, no, they're actually literal, you see them. But in any case, the Prophet goes through them. And he says, you see this, you see this, you see this. The man then, when the Prophet basically comes to the end of the signs of the end of times, he stands up and he walks off. And he's off. The companions are looking around like, okay, what was that? So, and in some narrations, there's other narrations of Abu Hurairah of this hadith as well. And the Prophet says in some other narrations, he sends some of the companions, go and find him. Go and find that companion of yours. Go and get him. So they go off and they're like, he's disappeared. They come back, he's disappeared. Don't know where he's gone. Went after him to find him and he's gone. Like literally vanished into thin air. And remember, this is Medina. Medina is really small. Like you're talking a block at most. Very, very small place. So you can't disappear. And if he was from Medina, because it's such a small place, everybody knows everybody. My kids used to say, like, they say to me, like, sometimes when I'm walking down the street and I see people, that I've grown up with or I was at school with, I'm like, yeah, you're right. How's it going? Cool. You give a little nod. They're like, Dad, you know everyone. I'm like, no, I don't. But you recognize faces. You kind of know who lives in your borough. You kind of grown up and so on. Although our borough is highly gentrified and many people who didn't grow up there are there now. But in any case, it happens. You recognize. Even if you don't know anyone by name, you still recognize the face. This guy just never been seen. So they go looking for him. They can't find him. What happens? They come back. The Prophet says, هَذَا جِبْرِيلُ جَاءَ لِيُعَلِّمَكُمْ دِينَكُمْ. This is Gabriel, as in the angel Gabriel. He came to teach you about your deen, about the code. So here, he came to teach you. And then you can see the questioning. Therefore, this is the curriculum. This is what you guys need to know. And this is a kind of Socratic / performance. It's a performative method, a performative pedagogy. It's a performative method of teaching people with their inquiring minds. So what do we learn here? If we go back and we look at the diagram, right? You've got this diagram here with the blue dotted line. That's the deen, the Abrahamic conception of reality, the law, and the way. So this is in one place you'll find God talking about this in the Quran. And all of this deen is basically what pervades it is godliness, Hanifiyya. The Prophet said, when some Christians came to ask him, they said, Muhammad, what do you bring? And this is like in very early years when he's in Mecca. So they say, Muhammad, what do you bring? He says, إِنَّمَا أُوتِيتُم بِالْحَنِيفِيَّةِ السَّمْحَةِ مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ. I come to you with Hanifiyya, godliness, Abrahamic godliness, and samha, leniency, chilled out. Like the law, the code I bring is not harsh, it's not hard. It's actually quite a liberal law. It's quite hands off. It lets you get on with things. So that's the samaha part, the samha. Millata Ibrahim. The faith of Abraham is basically the ways of Abraham. And they understood, because his response to the Prophet was, no, you're not really on the religion of Abraham, we are. So he understood exactly what the Prophet was saying, and they understood what Hanifiyya was. So here you have the Abrahamic conception of reality, the law and the way. How does that work? Well, you have the Abrahamic conception of reality. You can see these three boxes. You have the law and you have the way. The Abrahamic conception of reality that God talks about in the Quran, he talks about the law and he talks about the way. This, when you feed it into the Hadith of Gabriel, this is how it looks. The Abrahamic conception of reality is to look about the universe. It's a study of the cosmos. It's basically the study, not in depth, and I don't mean this scientifically as in we're going to sit down academically and do this in the secular academy, but it is basically godly astrophysics. You are literally studying the universe. So with Iman, you are studying this one to be served. Yeah? You are studying like these malaika. What are malak made of? They're made of light. They are basically light. They have no mass because light doesn't have mass. Yeah? And they are sentient life forms that are made of light. And light is an energy. We're all energy. Our brains are energy. We think through energy. Yeah? This is just another sentient life form. Who said that life has to be carbon-based and it has to be made of the earth? Like we're all made of the earth, right? We're taken from the earth. We're made of the earth. We have the same constitution of the earth. We have minerals in us. We have metals in us. If we don't have iron, we have iron deficiency, we'll die, literally. We are made of the soil. Yeah, and we evolved from the earth. God tells us this in the Quran. The Prophet talks about this very explicitly. Literally, we are evolved from the earth. That is a substance that we are made of. So we are carbon-based life forms, sentient life form with an energy that gives us consciousness. I'm telling you guys what you already know. But that's what the study of these features of the cosmos are. So when it comes to these malaika, these beings, this sentient life form, who said it has to be carbon? So you have sentient life forms made of light, and what is light? Electromagnetic energy. Yeah. You have decrees from God to understand what the purpose of these decrees are and what it's telling you to do. Yeah. They're not there for Catholics to sing them in Latin, a language they don't understand, as if there's some sprinkling magic dust and fairy special dust that you get on you and you're now suddenly saved. And in the same way Muslims do with the Arabic, yeah, and Jews do who don't understand Hebrew do it with Hebrew. No, it's a decree from the king. He's telling you to do something. He's telling you the law and the way. Singing it in a language you don't understand, basically, it's practicing its phonemes doesn't get you very far. So it's about the decrees. This is the conception of reality. And the messengers, who they were, the entire party, the entire clique, the crew. And what the last day is, what's going to happen and how it works. And the order, how things occur, how God coded. So we know about coding, right? You understand that there's languages of coding, there are algorithms, massive AI thing going on at the moment, right? And for a lot of like parents who are looking, whose kids are into coding, you're kind of looking up the road and saying, okay, how do they get into AI? How do they get into machine learning, AI learning, and so on? And it's crazy. And what is it all based on? Coding. And that's the build-up of a software. And obviously then the software works in a certain way. Well, the universe is coded. Qadar, the word qadar in Arabic, which is often translated as divine decree or, divine decree. What do you mean by divine decree? See, these are ancient, like old English words that people use. It's lost meaning. It doesn't even mean anything. But qadara in Arabic means to judge something's amount. Yeah, it's usually got to do with something quantitative. Yeah, so it's a quantitative evaluation, or it's judging something's amount or quantifying something. So qadr itself, when you say divine decree, meaning the zeros and ones of the universe, the way everything's coded, and then, as it moves, how that code behaves and how things unravel. These 6 things right here is what's going on. And Iman is a feeling fundamentally. So it's understanding the cosmos around you. When I say around you, I mean literally billions and trillions of light years around you, is meant to instill in you a feeling and emotion. people, is that what you're doing? Is that what your religion of Abraham is about? Most people say, no, you know what? I didn't even know this. I thought that was something I watched Brian Cox on BBC, and that is amazing, like study the universe. I didn't know this was our deen. People, can you see what's getting lost here? Across these religions, just villageness and silliness and irrationality has taken everybody over. It's like living in an alternate reality, to be honest. But this is what God wants. Look how fascinating it is. And for those driven by positivity and curiosity, your mind will never be satiated by what God has revealed. And then you have the law, submission to God. What does it mean? The law by its very nature is political. Yeah? Law means nothing if it doesn't have political weight. I can make up a bunch of rules. If I don't have a judiciary, if I don't have a policing system, me sitting there and legislating laws, pointless. So law is very much political, and there are purposes behind them. There are financial purposes, economic reasonings and meanings behind them. There are social reasons, things to do with like social unity, for example, or social cohesion. There are many, many different aspects, and we see this. So the law, one is a political proclamation. Then you have the salah to God. You have taxes, literally. Yeah? You have fasting, and you have paying homage to the king. So these are the things, the behaviors that you do. And it's not just one thing. God usually kills like 1,000 birds with just one stone. Like, forget 2 birds with 1 stone. So like, for example, salah. There are about 5 to 6 reasons and purposes of salah, of prayer, that Allah tells us explicitly in the Quran. And they have very different things. Some are about habits and mindfulness, so they cultivate and nurture you to be a certain way in the world. Some are about its effects in society, literally. So it has a different function depending on the context that we're analyzing. You have taxes. What's taxes got to do with anything but being political? What are taxes? Everybody contributes an amount if they have a certain benchmark, right? They contribute that amount into the communal pot for that communal pot to benefit the community which is paying the taxes. That's its purpose. You can't have a political community that doesn't have taxation. It doesn't work. It is basically to gather the resources that's required to protect the community from whom those taxes are taken. That's why we pay taxes. In Britain, why do we pay taxes? Imagine we pay taxes, we're paying an NI contribution, which is basically a health contribution. But then you turn up at the hospital, they say you have to pay. There's going to be riots tomorrow. Yeah? In, not Thatcher's time, John Major's time as well. You had the poll tax riots. Literally, people riot in the streets because of tax. Many civilizations fell. Many rebellions started because of taxes and high taxes. So tax is a very important part of that. And then you have the fasting. That says a lot about you. It's about training you, cultivating you. And especially today in the trends of like well-being and wellness, we're reading how much about mindfulness, about fasting, about, training the body, holding back on things, nutrition. Why is it's like one of the biggest industries at the moment. So why wouldn't it be there? And then you have this paying homage to the king, and that's about your allegiances. And then you have the way of being, ihsan. Ihsan is about your work ethic. It's about how you do things, the values you live by, essentially. And those are psychological, emotional, intellectual. Yeah? So it's about cultivating the person to be in the right place with the right mindset in order to achieve phenomenal outcomes. Can you see how all of this comes together? So fundamentally what's going on, and I think most of you have actually seen this before. You have the king. God provides subjects with enjoyment and sustenance. That's what life is about. Enjoy. People think life is about suffering and, we have to show our allegiance to God. Showing your allegiance to God isn't suffering. That's just stupidity. Yeah? To go out your way to suffer is stupidity. God doesn't want you to suffer. He literally tells you this. God wants ease for you. That is completely the opposite of I want you to suffer just to prove to me how much I mean to you. Anyone who does that is a narcissist. That's not a very positive relationship. Good people that like you, they don't suffer. They invite you to the barbecue. They invite you to the party and say, here, have some nice food. have some nice drinks. Let's chill, relax, listen to music, dance, XYZ. That's what they do. People who like you, they don't say, come to my house and I'm going to punch you in the face 4 times. Let's see if I'm that important that you will hold on. It's absurd. And Allah does not say this in the Quran anywhere. Not in the nowhere. Yeah, God says, in order for you to fight tyranny and oppression, you're going to have to stand firm against the enemies of God and your enemies. But that's a given. That's a logic, right? If somebody tries to break in your house, you're going to have to fight them. That's not how you live life. You don't live life fighting burglars. That's absurd. Now, God says that he provides subjects with enjoyment and sustenance in chapter 7, verse 32. These are clear verses. And this is just one. There's about 55. The king. So then what happens? Those subjects that God provides these things of enjoyment and sustenance to, they show recognition to God. They show gratitude. They show love. God appreciates the love. God loves the love. He appreciates it. Yeah? He appreciates the love and gratitude his subjects show him. And he becomes endeared to them. And he says, listen, me and you in good place. It's like you doing something nice for a person. They're like, listen, I appreciate that. Here's a box of chocolates. You're endeared. You did something good for that person and they recognize. And because they recognize, you're like, you know what? I'm going to help that person again when they need help. It's a very positive relationship. And notice, it's one that starts with God. It's not you. It's God, because he starts giving you first. You respond with gratitude. You don't just start, I'm going to be grateful, and God isn't giving you anything. So in fact, God starts the positive relationship with you as your king. And that is the fundamental characteristic of God. So where do we start with understanding how this works? First, we analyze and we look at the 6 features of the cosmos. We understand the reality we live in. Then we look at the 5 foundations of the very code we're meant to live by. And we look at the values and the values we're meant to live by. To do that code, to live that code, you need values. You can be really good at your job, but if you don't have good values, like you work out, you turn up on time, you play your position, you don't start trouble, you get your work done, those are values. Your job is pointless. You could be a genius, but nothing's going to get done. You need good values, a good work ethic to get things done. And the better those things are, the more amazing you're going to be and the more amazing the outcomes. Yeah? So what do these things do? They train you physically, your mind, your heart, your body. They basically put you in the right place. And they shape your perceptions to your environment so that you are able to recognize where God does things for you and give that gratitude to God, which then God gives back, and it's just a beautiful mutual relationship. That, people, is how it's meant to work. God literally tells us this. Yeah, very, very positive relationship with good attachment between you and God, understanding the way the world works. So therefore, God gives us the blueprint, and we come to the end here. God gives us the blueprint so that we are informed. God wants you to be informed, highly informed. It's like training. It's like continued professional development. God wants you to be highly informed, because the more informed you are, the better you can do things that you're meant to do. So here, God gives us the blueprint so that we are highly informed. Informed on what? Who the one to be served is. Because we end up serving ourselves. And when I say ourselves, we serve our impulses. The kind of desires that actually can destroy your life and make everything go off piste. You have people who have midlife crises, for example, and they give in to silly impulses. Other people give in to the impulse of the grass being greener on the other side, but then they get to the other side, there is no grass, it's not green, and it's just desert. So the one to be served, because that great entity only tells you to do things in your own interest. That great entity is supreme, doesn't get anything from you. So it's all in your benefit. This blueprint is the way things work, as in the order of all things. Why do these things happen in the world? Well, actually, I know why they happen. I understand the machine. I understand the cogs in the engine. So I understand why this happens and this happens. I might not like that happening. I might love that happening. But this has to happen, this has to happen. Those values, my own value judgments about those things are quite irrelevant. It's like making a value judgment of why the coffee machine works the way it does. Now, yeah, if you've got a suggestion and you can make it better, we're all ears. But until then, it is what it is, right? And when you understand that, you're like, okay, cool, I get it. I get it now. And it's to understand that. That's what studying Iman is about. That's what knowing, what Gabriel came to show. Like, listen, if you know these things, you're cool. If you're in a sport and you're playing the sport, but you don't know the rules and you literally don't know how to play the sport, it's quite frustrating, right? Everything's going to go wrong. Imagine you're playing soccer, you're running on the pitch and you see the ball and you go and pick it up. Handball, red card. You'll be frustrated. Every time I pick up the ball, they tell me off and then they give the ball to the other side. Little did you know, you're not allowed to touch the ball with your hand. That's why it's called football, not handball. Yeah? Like basketball. It's meant to go in a basket. So the minute you start putting it on the floor and rolling it, then clearly you're not playing basketball. Therefore, you become extremely frustrated. But say you know the game inside out, and then you have good practice at it. You're going to be LeBron James. Yeah? You're going to be Lionel Messi in soccer. That's how the game is played. And that's literally what God has given us. The blueprint, so we're informed. The one to be served. The way things work. Your place in the order of all things. Therefore, once you know your place in the order of all things, you understand the meaning of your life. And when you understand how this is working, what the meaning of your life is, you know how to get the most out of life. Given your particular situations, your strengths, your weaknesses, all of the kind of variables at play. That, people, is revelation. And that, people, is the purpose behind knowing all of these things and why Gabriel came to the final messenger of God, who then said, هَذَا جِبْرِيلُ جَاءَ لِيُعَلِّمَكُمْ دِينَكُمْ. That is Gabriel who came to teach you your deen, the code to live by. And therefore, people, Module 1, Module 2, welcome to the Gabriel curriculum, in which we take the most fascinating and wondrous journey through the cosmos, the universes and beyond, and deep within our own souls, to understand the nature of all things as God has revealed them over thousands and thousands of years from the dawn of human civilizations. And with that, I bid you farewell. Hope you have a wonderful week. Access to all courses and forums open on Saturday. I look forward to engaging you all, seeing you there, and actually getting this show on the road. May God's peace and blessings be